Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going way up high for a topic that's mission critical if you work with cranes. So whether you're a seasoned operator, a safety pro on site, or even if you're studying for that crane operator license, this one's for you.
Absolutely. We're going deep into OSHA's Appendix B to Subpart CC of Part 1926.
Okay, so for those who maybe aren't as familiar with the ins and outs of OSHA regulations, can you give us a little background on this subpart? What's it all about?
Sure, it lays out the rules when it comes to crane assembly and disassembly.
And this appendix.
Well, it takes those rules and shows you exactly what they look like in action with some real-world scenarios.
Oh, so it's not just about paperwork.
No, not at all. This stuff can get intense. We're talking about massive pieces of equipment and, the potential for seriously dangerous movement if things go wrong.
Okay, yeah, so let's break this down. This isn't just about abstract rules. We're talking real-world danger. Can you give us a sense of what's at stake here?
Absolutely. Imagine a scenario where a boom swings unexpectedly during assembly or disassembly. The consequences could be, catastrophic for anyone caught underneath. OSHA knows this, and that's why they have incredibly specific regulations in place to prevent these types of accidents. What this Appendix B does so well is it takes those regulations and shows you how to apply them in real-life situations that could easily pop up on any job site.
So it's kind of like taking those dry regulations from the textbook and dropping them right into the heart of the action.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, this appendix actually outlines two very specific scenarios, Rita, and we're going to break each one down to get those practical insights you need to stay safe.
Exactly. And these aren't just hypothetical situations. They highlight common challenges, and OSHA gives really clear guidance on how to minimize the risks involved.
All right, so let's dive into the first scenario then.
Okay.
This one focuses on something I think most crane operators and AD directors have had to deal with at some point: removing pins where you've got limited space to work with.
Right.
Now, the regulation itself is pretty straightforward. It says workers shouldn't be under the boom during pin removal unless it's absolutely unavoidable due to site constraints. But what's the logic behind that rule? Why is it so important?
Well, it all comes down to physics.
Okay.
Crane components are incredibly heavy, and the forces involved are enormous. Think about it. Even a slight shift in the boom's position during pin removal could have devastating consequences for anyone standing underneath.
Right, yeah.
So OSHA is basically saying, keep your people clear unless there's literally no other option.
And that no other option scenario is exactly what this first example is all about, isn't it?
Yeah.
It drops us right into a refinery where overhead piping makes it impossible to disassemble the boom on the ground.
You got it. So they're forced to do this tricky disassembly work up in the air.
Okay, now that sounds like a recipe for high-pressure stress.
Oh, yeah.
The source mentions workers having to access pins on the far side of the boom from an aerial lift. But because of all the pipes and equipment, the lift has to move under the boom to actually reach those pins. That sounds incredibly risky to me, even with all the proper precautions.
It is. And that's why OSHA stresses minimizing that risk as much as humanly possible. In this specific scenario, they recommend bringing in an assist crane.
Okay.
But it's not just about, general support. It's about strategically positioning that assist crane to support the section of the boom closest to where the workers are removing those pins. It's all about maximizing protection where it matters most.
So it's not just about having a safety net, it's about making sure that net is positioned exactly where it needs to be to catch anyone if the worst happens.
Precisely. And to further limit the amount of time anyone spends in that danger zone under the boom, they recommend a specific order for pin removal.
Ooh, interesting.
Get those far side pins out first, which lets you move that aerial lift out from under the boom ASP, and then you tackle the near side pins.
So every second counts in a situation like that.
Oh, absolutely.
All right, listeners, this is where I want to bring you into the conversation. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you had to work under a boom during pin removal? Maybe you were in a refinery like our example, or dealing with a different kind of tricky job site. What extra precautions did you take to make sure everyone went home safe that night? And if you haven't been in this situation, how would you approach it? Remember, every site is different, and the more you think through these challenges ahead of time, the better prepared you'll be when you find yourself working 100 feet up in the air.
Couldn't agree more. This scenario, while specific, really drives home the point that we need to carefully assess every risk before we even think about starting assembly or disassembly. There's no one-size-fits-all solution in this line of work, and you have to constantly adapt to the challenges each unique site throws at you.
That adaptability is key, especially when it comes to crane safety. Now, I want to move us along to the second scenario outlined in this OSHA appendix. This one is all about a concept that can be surprisingly tricky. Figuring out the center of gravity during assembly and why that's so crucial for keeping everything stable and safe. Can you break down why that center of gravity is such a big deal?
Of course, imagine trying to balance a pencil on your fingertip. Easy, right?
Yeah.
But only when you find that perfect center point. If you're off by even a tiny bit, the whole thing tips over. Now, take that idea and scale it up to a crane boom section that weighs several tons and has all sorts of irregular shapes. Finding that exact center of gravity is no longer a simple task. It's absolutely essential if you want to make a safe lift.
And the source material gives us a real-world example of this challenge, right?
Yeah.
It talks about using an assist crane to lower those massive boom sections into place during assembly. Ideally, you want to attach the hoist line right above that center of gravity, but that's easier said than done, isn't it?
It definitely is. And with some of those oddly shaped boom sections, it can be really hard to know for sure where that center of gravity actually is. You can do the calculations, but there's always a margin of error. And when you're dealing with this kind of weight, even a small error can turn into a big problem.
And that's where the second part of the OSHA regulation comes in, right?
Yeah.
It basically says, hey, if you can't be absolutely sure about that center of gravity, you need to have some extra safety measures in place.
Precisely. And this scenario gives us a perfect example of that. It talks about attaching the hoist line to this irregularly shaped boom section. And then this is the important part. Before lifting it fully, they do a test lift.
Okay.
By lifting the section just a tiny bit, maybe a few inches off the ground, they can instantly tell if it's going to tip. If one side rises faster than the other, that means the hoist line isn't perfectly aligned with the center of gravity.
So it's like a quick check, a mini experiment to make sure everything is balanced before you commit to that full lift.
That's a brilliant way to put it. And while they are doing that test, all personnel need to be completely clear of the section. You don't want anyone in harm's way if it does tip, even a little.
Right. It's about thinking ahead, anticipating the worst case scenario, and making sure you have safeguards in place before you even start the lift. And this scenario really makes me think about the pressure on the AD director. This is the person calling the shots on site, right?
That's right. The assembly disassembly director. They're responsible for overseeing the entire process and making sure it's done safely and correctly.
So they've got this giant crane to assemble. They're working with potentially limited information about where that center of gravity is on each section. And they have an entire crew whose safety depends on their decisions. It's a huge responsibility.
Absolutely. The AD director plays a critical role in ensuring everyone goes home safe at the end of the shift. They need to be able to assess risks on the fly, adapt to unexpected challenges, and make tough calls when necessary.
And that's exactly why this deep dive is so valuable for anyone involved in crane operations. Whether you're the one making those critical decisions or working on the ground, understanding these safety procedures and the why behind them is absolutely essential.
Couldn't agree more. These scenarios are just two examples out of countless challenges you'll encounter in this line of work. But they give us a really good look into the types of problems that pop up and the best strategies for keeping everyone safe.
It's all about planning ahead, making sure everyone's on the same page, and never, ever compromising on safety.
That's the heart of it all.
Now, before we move on to part 2 of this deep dive, I want to leave you with a question to chew on. Imagine you are the AD director in that second scenario. You've got this massive boom section, you're not entirely sure about the center of gravity, and the pressure is on. How would you ensure that lift is done as safely as possible? We'll pick up this conversation and explore some more insights from this OSHA source material in part 2. Until then, stay safe out there.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of crane safety. Before we took a moment to reflect, we left you with a challenging question. How would you, as the AD director, ensure a safe lift when you're dealing with uncertainty about a boom section's center of gravity?
Yeah, it's a question that really gets to the heart of what it means to be a leader in a high-risk environment, right? It's not always about having all the answers, but about knowing how to approach the unknown with caution and a commitment to safety.
That's exactly right. And while we encourage you to think through your own approach, it's worth remembering that OSHA offers a lot of valuable guidance for navigating these kinds of situations. It's not just about knowing the rules, it's about understanding how to apply them when things get complicated.
And speaking of applying those rules, we've been really digging into 2 specific scenarios from OSHA's Appendix B to Subpart CC of Part 1926, which focuses on minimizing risks during crane assembly and disassembly. It's amazing how much practical wisdom is packed into this document.
It really is. What I love about these scenarios is that they highlight something crucial about crane safety. It's not just about blindly following a checklist. It's about understanding the principles behind those rules and then using your judgment to apply them in real-world situations that are always a little bit different than what you find in a textbook.
Absolutely. Every lift is unique. Every site throws its own curveballs, and every crew has its own dynamics. Something that really stood out to me in both of these scenarios was the emphasis on clear communication.
Oh, yeah.
It seems like that's just as important as knowing how to operate the crane itself.
Couldn't agree more. Clear, concise communication is absolutely essential in any high-risk environment, but it's even more critical when you're dealing with machinery as powerful and complex as a crane. A small miscommunication can have, huge consequences.
In that first scenario where we had that worker in an aerial lift under the boom for pin removal, can you even imagine the level of coordination required between the crane operator, the AD director, the lift operator, and all the workers on the ground?
Oh, it has to be seamless. Everyone needs to be 100% on the same page. They need to understand the plan inside and out, and they need to be able to communicate any concerns or changes in the plan instantly. Any hesitation or misunderstanding could lead to a disaster.
And it's not just about talking to each other, right? I imagine they're using hand signals, radios, maybe even visual aids to make sure everyone's movements are perfectly synchronized.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just the mechanics of communication. It's about fostering a culture of safety where everyone on that site feels comfortable speaking up if they see something that doesn't look right, even if it's something minor. That kind of open communication can be the difference between a close call and a serious accident.
This whole discussion makes me think about someone who's studying for their crane operator license. It really shines a light on something they might not be getting in their textbooks.
What do you mean?
Well, they're learning all the technical stuff, load charts, rigging techniques, hand signals, but this deep dive really emphasizes the importance of those soft skills, like communication, teamwork, being able to assess risk on the fly. Those things are just as crucial as knowing how to operate the levers and pedals.
That's a really important point. Operating a crane safely isn't just about mastering the mechanics of the machine. It's about being a leader, a communicator, and a problem solver. It's about understanding that you're not just operating a piece of equipment, you're leading a team, and their safety depends on your decisions.
Yeah, those are qualities that you can't learn from a textbook. They're developed through experience, mentorship, and a constant commitment to learning and improving your skills.
Which is exactly why these OSHA resources are so valuable. They provide that real-world context, those practical insights that you just don't get in a traditional classroom setting.
Exactly. Appendix B isn't just a dry list of rules, it's a window into the complexity of crane operations and the critical thinking skills it takes to do it safely. It's like having years of on-the-job experience distilled into a few pages.
I like that analogy. It's like having a veteran operator sitting next to you, pointing out potential hazards and sharing tips on how to navigate tricky situations.
So, to our listeners out there who are on the path to becoming certified crane operators, soak up all that technical knowledge, but don't underestimate the importance of developing those soft skills. They're just as vital to your success and to the safety of everyone on your site.
Absolutely. And remember, we've only scratched the surface of what OSHA's Appendix B has to offer. We focus on 2 specific scenarios, but there's a wealth of information in there covering a whole range of challenges that might pop up during assembly and disassembly.
We've just planted a seed here. Our goal was to pique your curiosity and get you thinking critically about crane safety.
And to inspire you to seek out resources like Appendix B that can help you deepen your understanding and improve your safety practices.
Because at the end of the day, knowledge is power. And when it comes to crane operations, knowledge can truly mean the difference between a safe and successful lift and a potentially catastrophic accident. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive. We've been exploring some really critical aspects of crane safety during assembly and disassembly, using OSHA's Appendix B as our roadmap.
And we've gone beyond simply listing the rules, haven't we? We've talked about how important it is to think critically, to communicate clearly, and to be adaptable in a job where every day brings new challenges.
Exactly. We've seen how each lift is unique, each job site has its own quirks, and each crew has to work together seamlessly to make sure everyone stays safe. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from this whole discussion, moving from simply following the rules to cultivating a true culture of safety on crane sites.
I couldn't agree more. It's about seeing the bigger picture, recognizing that every decision has an impact on safety, and empowering every member of the team to speak up if they see a potential hazard.
Looking back at the 2 scenarios we've discussed, I think OSHA is really trying to instill that proactive mindset, that sense of shared responsibility for safety.
Absolutely. It's about identifying potential hazards before they turn into accidents, having backup plans in place for when things go wrong, and communicating constantly with everyone involved.
It's that awareness of what could go wrong that allows you to take steps to prevent it from happening in the first place.
And that's where experience really comes into play. The more lifts you've been involved in, the more different situations you've encountered, the better you'll be at anticipating those potential problems.
But even for those who are just starting out in the field, resources like this Appendix B can provide a valuable glimpse into those real-world scenarios and the lessons learned from them. It's like having a mentor there to guide you through those early lifts.
It's like having a veteran crane operator looking over your shoulder saying, hey, watch out for this, or here's a trick I learned for handling that.
It's such a valuable resource for everyone involved in crane operations. Whether you're the AD director making the big decisions, the operator running the crane, a rigger, a signal person, or a safety professional overseeing the whole operation, we all have a role to play in ensuring a safe work environment.
You're absolutely right. Safety is a shared responsibility. It's not just up to the person operating the crane or the AD director. Everyone on that site has a duty to speak up if they see something unsafe.
That's something I really want to emphasize to our listeners. If you see something that doesn't look right, don't hesitate to say something. Your voice could prevent a serious accident. We need to create a culture where safety is the top priority, and everyone feels comfortable raising concerns without fear of repercussions.
That's the kind of environment that leads to a truly safe workplace. One where everyone feels valued, everyone is looking out for each other, and everyone goes home safe at the end of the day.
That's what it's all about. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with this final thought. The scenarios we've discussed from Appendix B, they're just a starting point.
They're a jumping off point for further exploration. There's so much more to learn about crane safety.
Exactly. I encourage you to dive deeper into the OSHA regulations, research your specific crane models, familiarize yourself with the unique conditions of your job sites, and always prioritize safety planning and open communication with your crew.
Because when it comes to crane operations, it's not just about getting the job done, it's about getting it done safely.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into crane safety. This has been Safety One Source, dedicated to providing valuable safety resources. Until next time, stay safe out there.